It's not just us, the entire world is now watching Starbase. This is where SpaceX is preparing for a historic leap, sending Starship into a true orbital flight for the very first time, potentially with Flight 13. And this isn't just speculation. Elon Musk has hinted at this goal multiple times. More importantly, Flight 12 is expected to lay the final groundwork for that orbital push, with several critical tests that SpaceX has never fully detailed in public. So, the big question is, will Flight 13 actually make history, or are there still massive challenges standing in the way? Let's break it all down in today's episode of Alpha Tech. So far, Starship has already flown 11 times, yet not a single flight has seen the upper stage fully reach orbit. Meanwhile, Blue Origin's New Glenn has only flown twice. To be fair, its upper stage reached orbit on the very first flight. And on the second mission, it not only successfully deployed NASA satellites, but also pulled off a clean booster landing on a drone ship. A lot of people love to cling to this comparison and use it as a weapon against SpaceX, to criticize it, to mock it, to talk it down. But ironically, those attacks often end up highlighting SpaceX's achievements even more. First of all, New Glenn's upper stage isn't a spacecraft. It's simply a vacuum-optimized second stage, similar to Falcon 9's second stage or any traditional rocket. Expendable, used once, and done. Starship's upper stage, on the other hand, is a massive vehicle, 9 meters in diameter, over 50 meters long, designed to do far more than just deploy satellites, and crucially, it's built to be reusable. And as for the New Glenn booster, sure, it has landed on a drone ship once. That's something Falcon 9 has been doing weekly, sometimes even daily. Meanwhile, SpaceX's Super Heavy has already landed 3 times on Mechazilla, something no one else on Earth has ever done. Yes, Starship hasn't reached orbit yet, because SpaceX's engineers designed it from the ground up, not by copying or adapting traditional launch vehicle designs that already existed. And just look at the progression, flight by flight, from ITF-1 all the way to ITF-11. We've gone from vehicles losing control to violent mid-air explosions, to Starship successfully deploying payloads on suborbital trajectories, surviving brutally harsh re-entries almost flawlessly, and even pulling off fully controlled landing maneuvers. This program isn't standing still. Starship is growing up, and it's doing so at an incredible pace. If this momentum holds, then realistically, just 2 or 3 more flights could be enough for SpaceX to hit that ambitious milestone, sending Starship into orbit for the first time. And this is something Elon Musk clearly anticipated. In one tweet, he said, "Starship catch is probably Flight 13 to 15, depending on how well V3 flights go." But that target was set before Booster 18, which had been prepared for Flight 12, suffered a rupture at Massey's. Now that schedules have slipped, SpaceX will almost certainly recalibrate its goals for the upcoming flights. That means a ship catch on the tower could be pulled earlier, potentially anywhere from Flight 12 to Flight 14. However, under the original plan, Starship was supposed to reach orbit before attempting a tower catch. So, will it happen on Flight 12? Definitely not. Because on Flight 12, SpaceX's top priority will be validating the upgraded V3 structure and systems. That includes the increased thrust from 6 brand new Raptor 3 engines on Starship. Yes, SpaceX has said these engines have already accumulated over 40,000 seconds of runtime at McGregor, simulating real flight profiles. But none of that replaces a true flight test. Reaching true orbit isn't just about raw power. It demands engines that operate flawlessly in the harsh vacuum of space, with 0 extreme vibrations, perfect combustion stability, and reliable in-space relights when needed. Any hiccup could spell disaster. On top of that, to actually reach low Earth orbit, Starship must accelerate to an orbital velocity of roughly 7.8 kilometers per second. But that's only the ideal number in a perfect vacuum with no gravity. In reality, the rocket has to fight Earth's gravity, pulling it back the whole way up, known as gravity drag, and punch through the thick atmosphere at the start, creating atmospheric drag. Together, those losses add up to roughly 1.5 to 2 kilometers per second, meaning the full stack needs to deliver a total delta V of more than 9 kilometers per second from the ground. And that's where the numbers start to get truly mind-blowing. The Super Heavy booster, armed with 33 Raptor 3 engines, produces around 9,250 tons of liftoff thrust, already making it the most powerful rocket ever built. After separation, the Starship upper stage takes over, with 6 Raptor engines adding another approximately 1,680 to 1,800 tons of thrust to finish the orbital insertion. On paper, those numbers are more than enough to push a vehicle as massive as Starship into orbit, but the risk is still there. One engine failure at the wrong moment could mean loss of control, and if that happens, it doesn't just hand critics fresh headlines, it also pushes other critical milestones even further down the road. That's why it makes far more sense to validate the new hardware first. Beyond the engines, Flight 12 will also test the upgraded hot staging ring and the improved grid fins on Super Heavy. On the ship itself, attention will be firmly on the revised heat shield design. If Flight 12 goes well, then Flight 13 could be the moment the largest spacecraft ever built truly reaches orbit for the first time. And that's not just a nice milestone, it's a fundamental requirement. Without reaching orbit, any activity carried out in space lacks long-term value. A launch vehicle that can't achieve orbit can't reliably deliver payloads, let alone support more advanced missions like on-orbit refueling. And according to the current timeline, SpaceX is expected to demonstrate orbital refilling as early as June this year. That alone gives us a pretty clear idea of what Flight 13 will need to accomplish. First, SpaceX will need to confirm and close out any issues that might show up during Flight 12. If everything goes smoothly, the next step will be to validate stable orbital flight, including Raptor engine relights in space, a critical capability. Second, they'll almost certainly continue testing large-scale payload deployment, likely releasing 8 to 10 Starlink simulators to demonstrate that Starship can deliver up to 150 tons to low Earth orbit. It's also possible, though less likely, that Flight 13 could include a long-duration orbital test, where the ship stays in LEO for an extended period. The main goal there would be to accurately measure real-world propellant boil-off rates, providing baseline data for future orbital refueling sequences. And just to clarify what boil-off actually means, Starship uses liquid methane and liquid oxygen stored at extremely cold temperatures, hundreds of degrees below zero. Even in the vacuum of space, with excellent insulation, a small amount of heat from the sun, or from the vehicle itself, inevitably leaks in. Over time, that causes the propellant to slowly boil and vent away as gas. Left unchecked, you could lose around 0.3 to 0.5% of your propellant per day. That may sound small, but for large, long-duration missions, it's more than enough to derail the entire plan. Now, coming back to the landing mission. If Flight 13 successfully reaches orbit, the re-entry and splashdown profile would change significantly compared to the earlier suborbital flights. From IFT-3 through IFT-11, SpaceX targeted splashdowns in the Indian Ocean, thousands of kilometers away from Starbase. That choice was all about safety, keeping debris far from land, while collecting baseline re-entry data with minimal risk. With Flight 13, SpaceX could opt for a much longer trajectory, allowing the ship to complete 1 or even 2 full orbits before deorbiting. The most practical option would be re-entry over the Pacific Ocean, with splashdown farther west, possibly near Hawaii or the Central Pacific. This would allow SpaceX to test the heat shield at a different angle of attack and gather longer duration thermal data during re-entry. A more ambitious scenario would push the trajectory even further, enabling re-entry over the Atlantic Ocean, with splashdown to the east, potentially near the African coast or the Central Atlantic. That would require higher delta V to complete more orbits, possibly 3 to 5, but it would be a critical test of downrange return capability. Ultimately, that kind of profile is a stepping stone toward bringing Starship back to land, returning for direct recovery at Starbase or Florida once Tower catches mature around Flight 15. And next comes Flight 14, which I see as the third flight of the year, potentially taking place sometime between June and July. This is where SpaceX's original vision, as outlined by Elon Musk, really comes into focus, catching both Starship and Super Heavy with the tower. Under the current plan, Pad 1 would be used to catch Super Heavy, while Pad 2 would handle the Starship landing. In this scenario, both stages return to Starbase and are caught by Mechazilla's arms. That means both launch towers may need to operate simultaneously, Pad 1 receiving the booster, while Pad 2 prepares to catch the ship. Each tower is optimized for its specific stage, and Pad 2 will need time to transition from launch operations to recovery mode. The biggest challenge in this mission is the ship itself. Starship travels much farther downrange than the booster and endures a far more severe atmospheric re-entry. SpaceX will need absolute confidence that the vehicle remains structurally sound, with the heat shield performing flawlessly. The condition of the ship after re-entry will directly determine whether a precise and safe tower catch is even possible. If successful, SpaceX would become the first aerospace organization in history to recover both stages of an orbital-class rocket. And if all systems perform as intended, reuse could follow almost immediately, potentially on Flight 15, where Ship 43 or Ship 44 might become the first reused Starship prototype. That would finally unlock the long-promised potential of full and rapid reusability, dramatically lowering launch costs and pushing flight cadence to an entirely new level. Now, just a quick question. How many Starship launches do you think SpaceX will pull off this year? My personal guess is 7. What about you? Drop your prediction in the comments below. That said, the total number of Starship launches in 2026 will depend heavily on how quickly SpaceX can overcome the remaining technical challenges and establish reliable reusability. First, if the first Starship V3 flight goes smoothly, SpaceX could realistically reach 10 to 12 missions this year. But any major failure would almost certainly introduce delays. Second, reuse and mission cadence are absolutely critical for lunar ambitions. To support the large number of tanker flights required for the Artemis program, Starship needs to achieve a steady launch rhythm, ideally 1 flight per month or more. Production capacity also plays a key role. If rapid reuse isn't achieved, building new vehicles could become the bottleneck. A successful first V3 flight would pave the way for booster and ship recovery attempts in the missions that follow. And once SpaceX can reliably catch both stages, full reusability becomes real, removing hardware constraints for the rest of the year and opening the door to a much higher flight rate. This is great news. SpaceX crews are now removing the scaffolding around Ship 39 that we've been seeing since last week, a clear sign that heat shield installation and system checks are finished. If everything stays on track, in just 1 to 2 days, Ship 39 should roll out to Massey's site for cryogenic pressure testing. At the same time, on January 10th, construction teams at Pad 2 completed the installation of all 20 clamps on the orbital launch mount, the same number used at Pad 1. All 20 clamp arms are now in place and ready, although some fine-tuning may still be needed after testing. The main job of these clamps is to firmly hold the Super Heavy booster down during engine startup, preventing the rocket from lifting off too early. Only once all engines reach full thrust and the vehicle is fully stable do the clamps release, allowing the rocket to safely lift off and head toward orbit. That's just one of the similarities between Pad 1 and Pad 2. But once you start looking at the differences, you can really see how SpaceX has been upgrading the technology. The first major thing to pay attention to is the improved catching system. Back in late December, SpaceX removed a hydraulic actuator, and at the time, it looked like something might be wrong and that it was being taken away for repairs. But that wasn't the case at all. Instead, they rolled out a much larger and far more powerful hydraulic unit than the one currently used at Pad 1. And by now, it's already been installed. This component is absolutely critical. It's a massive linear hydraulic cylinder mounted between the carriage, the structure that moves up and down the tower, and each chopstick's arm. These actuators are responsible for opening and closing the chopsticks with extreme precision and speed, allowing them to securely catch either the Super Heavy booster or Starship. The system is driven by hydraulic pumps on the ground, connected through long lines and supported by accumulators mounted on the carriage, enabling lightning-fast response times. All of this points to one clear conclusion. This upgrade is a strong signal that SpaceX is actively preparing for its first-ever ship catch attempt at Pad 2. And if that still isn't convincing enough, there's another key difference between the Mechazilla arms at Pad 2 and Pad 1, the length of the chopsticks. From the very beginning of construction, the chopsticks at Pad 2 were built about 10 meters shorter than those at Pad 1. This likely traces back to Elon Musk's earlier criticism that the original arms were simply too long, adding unnecessary inertia and slowing down their response time. Shortening the arms brings some very real advantages. It reduces overall mass and inertia, allowing the system to move faster and react more quickly to catch Starship. And that matters, because Starship is significantly lighter than the Super Heavy booster, but it comes with a complication of its own: 4 large flaps. To catch Starship safely, the timing has to be perfect. The chopsticks need to grab the vehicle at the exact moment when the 2 aft flaps have dropped below the level of the arms. At that point, Starship is still descending at around 2 to 3 meters per second, so the system has to react instantly, locking onto the catch pins without delay. Any hesitation or mistimed movement could lead to a bad contact, potentially damaging both the catching system and the vehicle itself. And as you know, catching Starship is far more difficult than catching Super Heavy, mainly because of the vehicle's condition on return. Starship is coming straight out of orbit after enduring extreme temperatures, intense structural stress, and the brutal forces of atmospheric re-entry. The ship doesn't just need to be caught, it has to be stabilized immediately. That's why the Mechazilla arms have to strike a delicate balance between sheer strength and adaptability. Miss either one of those, and a successful catch simply isn't possible. That's why a lot of people say Pad 2 is meant for catching the ship, while Pad 1 is for catching Super Heavy. But that idea isn't entirely accurate. Back in late November, SpaceX also shortened the chopsticks at Pad 1, prioritizing flexibility in much the same way as Pad 2. The goal is clear: make sure either tower can catch both vehicles, providing redundancy and a solid backup option if needed. So, are there any other differences? Yes. And this one sits right beneath the launch mount at Pad 2. Pad 2 features an integrated flame trench, a critical piece of infrastructure found at many launch sites around the world. For SpaceX's Starship system, this trench is built to be exceptionally robust and heat-resistant. Its main job is to channel the intense exhaust and heat from the Super Heavy booster away from the launch mount during liftoff, protecting nearby hardware and significantly reducing post-launch repair work. At the center of this trench, directly beneath the launch mount, is a unique feature: a powerful water-cooled, dual-sided flame deflector, often referred to as the flame bucket. This one-of-a-kind system plays a crucial role in absorbing and redirecting the enormous exhaust plume from the engines. Feeding this deflector is what's known as the deluge farm, or high-pressure water suppression system. It works similarly to the system at Pad 1, using high pressure to spray water through outlets around the mount. However, Pad 2's deluge system is designed to hold and release significantly more water, and it's expected to operate at even higher pressures. According to the official environmental assessment for the Starship program, Pad 2's system can use up to around 422,000 gallons of water each time it's activated, whether for a static fire, a launch, or even a landing test. In past tests, the overflow discharge pipes at the water tank area produced plumes rising more than 300 feet high, taller than the quick disconnect arm on the tower itself. That might sound like an enormous amount of water, but it's far from wasteful. One of Pad 2's standout upgrades is the installation of recovery pumps inside the drainage trench, allowing water to be collected and recycled back into the storage tanks. One major edge Pad 2 has over Pad 1 is how quickly it can bounce back after an aborted attempt. Even if the water deluge system has already been triggered and the launch is called off, Pad 2 is designed for rapid cleanup and turnaround. That means once the problem is resolved, teams can realistically attempt another test or launch the very same day, a level of flexibility that Pad 1, in its current form, just can't offer. Another question many people have is why we still haven't seen SpaceX build a separate tank farm for Pad 2. The answer is simpler than it looks. At Starbase, Pad 1 and Pad 2 actually share a common main tank farm. Based on weekly updates from Starbase, this shared tank farm sits between the two pads, but the section feeding Pad 2 has been completely redesigned. It features a higher number of pumps, more subcoolers, and enhanced sub-chilling capability, all aimed at dramatically cutting down propellant loading time, potentially to under 50 minutes compared to the older Pad 1 setup. Pad 2 only shares the primary storage tanks. The ground support equipment, like pumps and subcoolers, is dedicated to each pad, specifically to avoid bottlenecks when SpaceX starts pushing a higher launch cadence. Because both pads rely on the same infrastructure, SpaceX has also expanded the tank farm by adding an extra deluge water tank, which has recently been seen being tied into the water system during flyovers. At the same time, major progress has been made on the blast wall, further protecting the area and strengthening the overall resilience of the launch site. But is simply upgrading the tank farm really enough? Each Starship launch consumes close to 5,000 tons of propellant, the equivalent of roughly 200 tanker truck deliveries for a single flight. And looking ahead to lunar missions, where 5 to 10 launches may be needed just for on-orbit refueling, it's fair to wonder whether Starbase could eventually turn into a traffic nightmare. The answer is likely no, because SpaceX has already taken concrete steps to deal with that challenge. Right at Starbase, they're building a new on-site facility known as the ASU site, designed to produce cryogenic fluids locally. Construction has been underway for more than 2 months now, and recent updates show a steady flow of new hardware being installed, pumps, small storage tanks, and other supporting equipment. If progress continues at this pace, the system is expected to come online by the end of this year. Once the on-site air separation unit at Starbase is fully operational, SpaceX will no longer need to truck in liquid oxygen and liquid nitrogen from distant suppliers. Instead, these cryogenic fluids will be transferred directly from the ASU to the shared tank farm near Pad 1 and Pad 2 through underground cryogenic pipelines. More specifically, the ASU has been deliberately placed across the highway from the main launch complex, providing both safety separation and adequate buffer distance. After LOX and LN2 are produced through cryogenic air separation and distillation, they will flow straight through these underground lines into the main storage tanks, eliminating road congestion and cutting out multiple logistical steps. Honestly, it's a very smart piece of infrastructure planning.